Ecclesiastes chapter number 2. I figured I'd give you a hard book to find tonight, so give me time to breathe after I sing, all right? It takes a lot of air whenever you're doing that. Ecclesiastes tonight, chapter number 2. I want to thank you for being here on this closing night. There's some of you who have been here in every service. There's others of you that maybe you wanted to, but for whatever reason, you were kept from it, but I'm so glad that you're here tonight, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy week to be a part of the meetings. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, and while you finish finding it, I just want to say a couple of things to Pastor and also to the Johns, and so good to see Brother Dan and Miss Rachel here tonight, but it's a privilege to be back at Kendall Park. It's been several years since I thought I'd made Pastor mad, and no, I'm just kidding. Sometimes it's a matter of just your paths crossing, and I'm grateful that the Lord worked out this opportunity. I've known the Browns for years. I first met them when I was a college student, and they were in New York in a church, and that would have been around 1994, I think. And you know what? Their love for the Lord and their going forward for the Lord has not changed one lick. And I hope that next week, as you honor their anniversary of their ministry here, that it'll be a special time. The Lord has truly blessed you with a wonderful couple. I don't know of a man and a wife more hospitable and kind and gracious than the Browns, and I'm so glad that the Lord has placed them here. And for the Johns to be able to see them serving here, it's just, it makes me feel a little bit old because, you know, when I first met them, they were single and had no clue that they were going to get married. And but the Lord has blessed their ministry here. I appreciate, I told Megan this, she did a great job playing the piano while she was in school. As a matter of fact, if I remember right, Megan, there was a group that you played for that I had several guys. You don't remember it, but that's because you were so busy you don't remember anything as a college student. But I do, but it's been a blessing to hear her put her talents to use here. You folks putting her in the fire has really helped her, you know, and hear her music ministry. And then, you know, I knew that he could preach, but I didn't know he could lead music too. And Brother Josh has shown me that, and the thoughtful worship that comes across as you transition from song to song, and then to see the Browns from all the way over in Madagascar and to be here, that's a special treat. It's not every day that you get to see your graduates that are serving on the field. And then you come to a place like this and you see a lot of new faces. You're like, is that bad? No, that's good. The reason that's good is because it shows you that people are reaching out with the gospel and lives are being changed. And inevitably, some people will pass away. Some people will move. And the only way you're going to get new blood in is to go out there with the gospel and to proclaim it. See people saved, their lives changed. And so it's been a blessing to see new faces here this week as well. I hope that you'll pray for the college as you think about Ambassador. We would love for the Lord to bring us more like the ones that are represented in this church. There's a great need. We get calls every week. This is the hardest thing. Somebody says, what's the hardest thing you deal with as the president? And, you know, they say it's probably finances. I said, no, that's number 2, all right? But I'll tell you what number 1 is every week we get calls from churches, and you know what they're looking for? They're not looking for building programs, building contractors. They're not even looking for a new youth program. You know what they're looking for? Men. And I joke, and I say this sort of tongue-in-cheek, but I don't even have bad names to give them. Not that I would anyway. But there is a great need, and I really want to encourage every young man and every young lady in this church. I hope that you'll have a heart that is willing to do whatever God wants you to do. You know, sometimes people, they say, well, you just think that every young man ought to be a preacher, and you think that every young lady ought to marry a preacher. And I say, really, that's not what I believe, but I will tell you this, every young person ought to struggle with it. Every young person ought to be open to it. And we need more like those who are represented in this church and out of this church to go do the work. And so, I surrendered my life to the Lord when I was 15. I said, Lord, I don't know what you want me to do, But I said, Lord, whatever you want me to do, I'm willing to do it. And at that time, I didn't know if God was going to call me to be a trash pickup guy, a plumber, a mechanic, a lawyer. I had no clue. But then it was 2 years later when I was a senior in public high school that God made it very clear to me that He had burdened me to preach the gospel. And you know, a lot of people feel sorry for me, but I said, don't feel sorry for me. Don't feel sorry for me and my wife, because we're having, it's adventurous. It surely is. You never know sometimes what a day may bring, but both of us have a peace and a completion in our hearts that serving the Lord in the ministry is what we need to be doing, and we couldn't imagine life without it. And so just pray that the Lord would raise up more laborers for the harvest. That's my prayer at Ambassador. It's a continual growing burden that just sometimes if I just think about that, it gets a little bit overwhelming, and I have to say, you know what, Lord, I need to see that need, but I also need to keep going forward. But pray for us in that regard. The Lord's blessed us with a good student body this year, and we've already got some signed up for next year, and so we'll just cross that bridge when we get to it and see what we have. Ecclesiastes chapter 2. In a moment, I'm going to read a couple of verses and then skip to the bottom of the text, but we'll actually cover about 17 verses tonight. In the messages that I've preached this week, there are two purposes, two reasons in which I've preached them. Number one, and most importantly, is so that every heart in this room is confronted with the gospel and their own need of a Savior, and that all of us as individuals would let God work in our hearts. The immediate need is God work in us. But there's another reason I've preached these messages. I hope for Christians here that these messages will equip you as you go out and you talk to others about God and eternity and the gospel, that it will give you a vantage point, that it will give you a foundation. For instance, the message on Sunday, who is God? There are many people in this area and all over this country, they don't know how to answer that question. And you'd say, as a Christian, I'm not sure that I'd know how to explain it either. Well, at least you have a starting point with what you've heard in the messages. And so I hope that you'll keep those in mind, and that the Lord will bring those to your mind as you reach people with the gospel. But tonight, I want to preach a message that has a little bit of a dreary title. I can't come up with titles as good as your youth, as Brother John can come up with. He was really good at coming up with good titles in college, and I'm not going to harangue him about it, but they really were good. And you know, but tonight the message, the title may seem a little dreary, but I want you to hold on, because you got to wait till you get to the end of the message. But the title describes the way a lot of people feel in this world. And the message that I want to preach to you tonight is entitled, How to Hate Your Life. I know there's a lot of books that have been written that tell you, your best life now. There are books that have been written to tell you how to have the best in life. And before the message is over with, we're going to find that. But tonight, I want to preach to you a message that shows you how one of the wisest man in all of the world, Solomon, felt at a certain point of his life. And you might be surprised by what he said. Look with me in Ecclesiastes chapter 2 and verse number 1. I said in mine heart, Go to now, and I will prove thee with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure. And behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of mirth, what doeth it? I sought in mine heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting mine heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the sons of men, which they should do unto the heaven all the days of their life. I made me great works. I builded me houses, I planted me vineyards, I made me gardens and orchards, and I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruits. And I made me pools of water, to water therewith the wood that bringeth forth trees. I got me servants and maidens, and had servants born in my house. Also I had great possessions of great and small cattle above all that were in Jerusalem before me. I gathered me also silver and gold, and also the peculiar treasure of kings and of the provinces. I gat me singers, men singers, and women singers, and the delights of the sons of men as musical instruments, and that of all sorts. So I was great, and increased more than they that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. Now, with that summation in mind, let's skip to verse 17. Therefore I hated life, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me, for all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Isn't that quite a jump? In one sentence, you talk about how I have everything and more that anybody else before me has had. And the wisest man in the world, named Solomon, says, therefore I hated life. And it's my contention to you tonight, in these first 17 verses, they prove very well how a man or a woman can hate their lives. You know, I enjoy talking to teenagers. I preach in teen camps every summer. And you know, you have some teens that are very outgoing. I mean, they come up to you no problem, and they love to talk, and they're big chatterboxes. And then you have others, and they just don't even like to talk to the preacher. And I love zeroing in on those people. I'll find them before the service and sit down and say, hey, how are you doing? I'm doing fine. Well, that's good. I'm glad. You know, did you have a good day? Yeah, I did. Can you speak complete sentences? Well, yeah, I can, you know. And you know, you just sort of have a little fun with them. And sometimes they just open up, and you know, other times it's just a little bit of a journey. You just have to take your time with them to warm up to them. But I love talking to young people after the service. Sometimes they'll be leaving, and I'll be shaking hands, and I'll do something on purpose that's a little bit mean. But it sure is fun. I really enjoy it. You know, when people go out, a lot of times, you know, they'll shake your hand, and I'll say, hey, it's good to see you tonight. And they're like, you too, you know. And somebody else, hey, it's good to see you tonight. You too. Hey, it's good to see you tonight. You too. Hey, it's good to see you tonight. And then I'll mix it up, and a teenager will come through, and I'll say, how are you doing? And he'll say, you too. And then he just walks on by, you know. And I know as they're going out the door, they're like, oh, I can't believe I said you too. That's not what I was supposed to say. I love just digging and prodding a little bit. But you know, through the years I've talked with some teens, and I'll never forget one conversation that I had with a teenager. This was a teenager that was raised in a Christian home. But yet when you looked at him, he had misery all over his face. And I will never forget what he told me that day. My heart broke when he looked at me and he said, I hate my life. He just spoke what he felt in his heart. Let me tell you, there are a lot of people in this world today, if they had to sum up their life in one sentence, that's how they'd sum it up. They go to work, they exist, they experience the things of life, and at the end of the day, they say to themselves, I hate my life. And that's exactly what we find in a man's heart many years ago. A man who had great authority, a man who had great wealth, a man who had great learning, and yet he was hollow inside. But I'm going to tell you, hollow people are not only in the Bible. Sometimes you find them in churches. Sometimes you find them on the streets. I want to ask you tonight, if you had to sum up your life, is that how you would sum it up? I hate my life. There's some of you, you know what, you work with people and you know that's exactly how they feel. And maybe even they have gone as far to express that to you. Listen to me. Listen to the message tonight. Learn how they got in such a state. And then when you understand how they got there and you try to help them out of that chasm, listen to me. There is nothing that can lift someone out of the mindset of I hate life more than Jesus Christ Himself. Now, what is it that Solomon embraced? What is it that Solomon did that led him to the conclusion to say, therefore, I hate life? I propose to you 3 things tonight. The first thing that brought Solomon to the brink of saying, I hate life, and this may surprise you, but it was entertainment. You say, how do you get entertainment? Read with me verses 1 and 2 again. You look while I read. I said in mine heart. By the way, have you ever said in your heart anything? Sometimes we read the Bible and it's like, I said in mine heart. I don't understand that. Yes, you do. Sir, have you ever sat in a mall while your wife is shopping? And you see these people go by and you're like, I would never wear that. You never opened your mouth, but you said it in your heart. There may be some of you, before this message is over, you'll never say it with your mouth, but in your heart, you're like, he's preaching too long. Sometimes it's not your lips that say that, but your faces do. Did you know we preachers that can actually see you when we preach? I know that's a real stunning revelation. But we really can. I mean, you can tell when a teenager's zoned out. You know, it's just like, whoa, man. I mean, is it really that bad? We're 5 minutes in. You know, give me a break. Give me a chance. But you know, we live in a day and a time that is so driven by entertainment. And Solomon said in his heart, he said, go to now, I will prove thee with mirth, and therefore enjoy pleasure. You know, the world, the philosophy of the world thinks that pleasure fixes everything. The world tells man, listen, you do what feels good, and if you do what feels good, then you're doing the best thing in life. But I'm going to tell you, that's a horrible way to live, because you know the drug addict, do you know why they do what they do? Because they enjoy the pleasures of what they're doing, although they fail to see the destruction that it brings. You live a life that's lived by pleasure, it'll take you to a premature grave, or it'll take you to a miserable life. But Solomon said, hey, the cry of my heart is, listen, I want to enjoy pleasure. Now, some of you this evening, you're like, man, this is really off to a bad start. The preacher's saying that we can't have any fun. That is not what the preacher's saying. Throw your predispositions away for a moment and listen to me. Listen, is pleasure in and of itself a bad thing? The answer is no. Listen, there are some pleasures in life that one can enjoy that there's no biblical prohibition of. You may want to go fishing, or you may want to watch a particular sport or participate in a particular sport. Listen, pleasure in and of itself, it's not that pleasure is a problem. However, let me tell you this, there are some good pleasures that become a problem when we make them a god. And if you need any help figuring out if you've put anything above God, just look at what keeps you out of church or what you value more than anything else, and that's your value system, and it'll show you what's most important to you. We can say all day long we love the Lord. A man can say all day long he loves his wife, but if he never stays in the same house with her, you'd start having some serious questions. Well, a man can say the same thing, I love the Lord, but eventually if he never comes, you say, his actions speak louder than his words. And really his actions tell what he values the most. But there's some pleasures in and of themselves, they're not bad. But let me tell you, the Bible does expressly condemn a number of sinful pleasures. When you're talking about immorality, when you're talking about violence, when you're talking about things that are unethical, listen, any of those things, when they're in the realm of pleasure, I don't care who does it. I don't care if it's a preacher that does it. If God says it's wrong, it's wrong. But have you ever noticed how sometimes when the going gets tough, what's one of the things we do? We run to pleasure. You ever had a bad day and you've just flipped through reels on a phone? Now this isn't a Solomon preaching now, this is 2023 preaching. You're like, I've just had a bad day. You know what? I just need to push everything away. And then what do? We enjoy pleasure. And sometimes pleasure has a numbing effect, or sometimes it even intoxicates us. And we live for pleasure. But notice at the end of verse 1, Solomon said, and behold, this also is vanity. When you see that word vanity in the book of Ecclesiastes, remember this one word. We're going to end up with it tonight. Just remember the word empty. If you want to think about vanity, just remember the word empty, and by the end of the message, you're going to understand it. Solomon said, I retreated to pleasure, I retreated to entertainment, and yet I was hollow inside. In verse 2, he thought about laughter. In verse 3, he sought to acquaint himself unto wine, and yet in all of this, he has an emptiness in his heart. And you know what? There are even Christians that feel empty and they're unfulfilled and they're unsatisfied. Why? Because they've put their faith in entertainment rather than looking to God and rather resting in Him and hiding in Him. It's too often that YouTube and our social media apps are used thousands of times more than our Bibles. Well, you say, there you go again. Listen, I'm not against everything. It's just you better be careful about what you're for. And listen to me. If you just retreat to entertainment and you expect the Hollywood actors to console you, I assure you Jesus will do a lot better job. I'm talking about perspective. And young people, listen, for those of you in here that are under the age of 20, and the rest of you are young too. If you're under the age of 100, all of you are young, but the younger ones under the age of 20, listen to me. One of the worst things you can do is develop such a habit which you retreat to entertainment now that it numbs your mind and it numbs your soul and it programs you more than the Bible does. And I believe that is at an epidemic in our society. People spend much more time being indoctrinated by Hollywood than Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And it's because of our love for entertainment. You think about it, there's some of us, if a church cancels a service, we say, praise God, but the very moment the cable goes out and our televisions are all of a sudden silent, now it's World War III. You know, we say, boy, I'm going to tell you what, I don't know how much longer I can handle this. It's because we like entertainment. And so if you're here tonight and you're seeking entertainment that's not pleasing to the Lord, just remember this, that there's pleasure in sin for a season. And then when that pleasure is expired and it's revealed, I'm going to tell you the hard consequences come. But if you live a life that's just given to pleasure and entertainment, listen to me, it'll lead you eventually to say, therefore I hate life. But not only did entertainment bring Solomon to the point where he said that he hated life, the second thing was enrichment. When I talk about enrichment, I'm talking about stuff. Isn't that a relatable word? We got a lot of stuff. My wife and I have been married for 29 years. We have more stuff now than we've ever had. And it's stuff. I mean, where did this come from? You know, we got that 20 years ago. Where did this come from? But there was not a man on the face of God's earth that had more stuff than Solomon. Look with me at verse 4. Now in verses 4 and 5, I'm going to read, and 6, I'm going to read these words. In a moment, I'm going to ask you questions, so pay careful attention. I made me great works. I builded me houses. I planted me vineyards. I made me gardens and orchards, and I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruit. I made me pools of water to water therewith the wood that bringeth forth trees. Let me ask you a question. What word is repeated throughout those two verses? Me. You know, and that's really what the idea of enrichment is all about. It's me. I want lots of stuff. Materialism. Now again, some of you will go out of here and you'll say, well, you know, he's just saying that we can't have nice stuff and that we have to wear ratty clothes and we have to drive broken down cars. And would you stop? No, I'll tell you what I'm saying. If your security and your estimation in life is how much money you have in the bank or the stuff that you have, and you could care less about eternity, you've got it all wrong. There's some of you that go to the city maybe every day to work, and they talk about how much money flows through the hands of those people. And listen, there's probably guys that are wearing suits. One suit's more than my entire wardrobe, but I'm going to tell you something. If you put a premium on the things that you have and you lose your own soul, what good is it? Solomon said, I got me. In other words, it was me, 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 me. I remember years ago, our kids, when they were smaller, we were listening to Patch the Pirate stories on cassette tape. Boy, does that really date us, all right? But I remember there was one, I don't remember what the storyline or what the story title was, but I remember there was a song, it was Me First, and my boys were singing it in the back, and it was a song where they'd go back and forth, and get on each other's nerves and get on my nerves. One time I about stopped the car, and I was like, that's it, you're going to stop singing that stuff. You thought they were singing horrible music. No, they were singing Patch, but I was like, this Me First, driving me nuts. Me first, me first, me. I was like, we're going to stop that. But I'm going to tell you, it's one thing to live like that in a car with two children, but if you're in a marriage and you've got two spouses and all they can say is me first, you can mark it down, it's going to go in flames. You know, if somebody gives me something that's new or they give me something I don't have, do I appreciate that? Yes. And do I value that? Yes. But if I live every day of my life just based on what I have and what I don't have, and it's not what I want, and I am living in a materialistic fashion, and my day depends on what I am given materially, I'm going to tell you, I am living an awful, awful life. Now, I expect lost people to live that way, but Christians live that way too. What all did Solomon have? Well, he said, I built me houses. Did you notice that was plural? There's some of you, you're like, man, I'm going to tell you what, if I could just get out of Jersey, buy another house. Some of you are like, if I could sell my house in Jersey, I could buy 5 in Alabama. You know, things are so high up here, you know. Some of you are already plotting your way, you know. Some of you think, boy, if I just had another house, if I just had a summer house that I could get away from, that'd make me happy. I'm sure that'd make you happy, but here's a man, I'm going to tell you, I don't think he had 1 or 2. I think he had a lot, and at the end, he said, I hate life. He said, I builded me houses, I planted me vineyards, I made me gardens and orchards. Listen, this guy said, forget about going to the grocery store. I'll grow it all myself. Maybe Solomon was the first organic farmer. But I'm telling you, Solomon is like, hey, I'm going to grow all this stuff. I'm going to have the freshest stuff. And then he said, I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruits. Verse 6, I made me pools of water to water therewith the wood that bringeth forth trees. You know, here is something that really predates anything we've known. It's like Solomon developed his own irrigation system. He said, not only am I planting all this stuff, but I'm going to figure out how to water it. I don't know how he did it, but he had the water that was running to these trees that he had planted. Listen, if you're in a household today and you live in a neighborhood and somebody's got an irrigation system, you're like, boy, I'll tell you, they're rolling in it. Now you're here tonight and you say, well, I got an irrigation system. Well, I'm glad you're rolling in it. But I'm telling you, Solomon had an irrigation system before the gated communities knew what they were like. And then in verse 7, he said, I gat me servants and maidens and had servants born in my house. I mean servants. Ladies, wouldn't you like to have a servant in your house? Wake up in the morning and say, bacon and eggs scrambled, please, and wheat toast. 7:30, have it done. When I watched my children function, and it was interesting. My oldest son, he had a servant. It was called his younger brother. I could say to him, I say, Andrew, take out the trash. And Andrew would say, all right, Dad, I got it. And then he'd look at Jared, and he'd say, hey, Jared, can you take out the trash? And then Jared would look at his little sister and say, Karis, could you take it? And I had to say, stop it. Oh, would you please stop it? Some of you are like, we got some servanthood going on in our household right now. But I'm going to tell you, Solomon had people to wait on him of all sorts. He said, also I had great possessions of great and small cattle above all that were in Jerusalem before me. He said, listen, the numbers, I've got them beat. I've got the livestock like you wouldn't believe. Verse 8, I gathered me also silver and gold and peculiar treasure of kings and of the provinces. You know, there are probably some of you right now, maybe you're looking at retirement. You're looking at retirement with one eye and the stock market the other. Treasuries I saw were going up over 5%. And you're trying to figure out, boy, you know, how can it, when I retire, I have the most cabbage? You know, when I'm talking about cabbage, I'm talking about money so that you can, you know, live and survive. And there's certainly wisdom in that. But for Solomon, it wasn't just a matter of, boy, I hope I can get by. Let me tell you, the man had heaps of it. He had gold and silver like you wouldn't believe. I lived in a household, I guess it would be safe to say, we lived in poverty. And sometimes my mom would make a statement like this. She'd say, boy, if I just had $1 million, you know. She would say that on numerous occasions. She'd go, if I just had $1 million. And there's some of us, we're thinking, I'm going to tell you what, my problems in life would be solved if I just had $1 million. Let me tell you, $1 million doesn't even begin to wash away your sin. You see, we weren't redeemed with corruptible things as silver and gold, but with the precious blood of Christ. If you're here tonight and you think that money may solve your problems, the truth is that may be the beginning of them. Solomon, he had silver, he had gold, but now this is really amazing to me. Notice in the middle of the verse, he says in verse 8, I gat me men singers and women singers, and the delights of the sons of men as musical instruments, and that of all sorts. Listen, if we want to buy music today, what do? We don't even buy CDs anymore. You know what we do? We go and we'll go to our phone and we'll go to Spotify or we'll go to iTunes or we'll go to Amazon and we buy our music. There's some of you that you say, I just download my music, and that's how you buy it. It's pretty simple. And isn't it really nice of them to just make it one click? It's really not about your convenience. It's about their coffers. That's why they make it so easy to buy something. But you know, if we want music nowadays, we just go on our phones and we click it. Let me tell you how rich Solomon was. Solomon said, you know what, I'm not going to buy the recording. He said, I'm just going to buy the group. I'd say he was a loaded goat, wouldn't you? Why, man alive, I'll tell you what, I'll buy the best tenors, and I'll buy the best basses. I'll buy the highest sopranos, and I'll buy the fullest altos, and I'll tell you, we'll just have a time. And you know what? Let's buy some trumpeters, and let's buy some people with those violins. And for the southern ones, he said the fiddlers. I mean, Solomon's just like, hey, I'm going to buy the entire group. I'm going to buy all of the instrumentation. Listen, even today, you don't hear about Bill Gates doing that. You don't hear about, Elon Musk. Well, I'm just going to buy the group. No, but Solomon did. Now, the reason I go through that a little lighthearted, a little obvious tonight is because Solomon had so much, but yet his heart was so empty. Why is it that there's people at your workplace that say, I hate my life? I'm going to tell you, because they don't have anything to live for, because they're living for another dollar, and it always seems to be a dollar short. And they're living for enrichment. But can I tell you, if you're a Christian here tonight and you're living for enrichment, listen to me. The Bible says for you to lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. You know, I think one of the reasons that holds us back from serving God is we're too attached to stuff. And Solomon had it all. Notice with me in verse 10, He says, and whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. And I withheld not my heart from any joy, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was the portion of all my labor. Do you get what that man just said? Basically, he said, if I wanted it, I bought it. If I wanted to do it, I did it. Now, there'd be some people, they say that'd be the dream. But I'd be happy every day when I came to church. If every store I walked in, I just bought the dresses I wanted. Some lady'd say that, or some guy'd say, I'll tell you what, it'd be nice if I walked into the sporting goods place and just bought whatever I wanted to. I think I'll buy a new gun, or I'll buy a new bow, or I'll buy something, whatever you like. Everybody likes something. But Solomon said, I've got so much money, I have so much, I haven't withheld anything. And yet he says, therefore I hated life. Let me tell you, stop living for things and start living for God, Christian. And if you're here tonight and you say, you know what, I just have always thought money would make me happy. Here's my question to you. What have you done with Jesus Christ? The one who provides forgiveness, something that no amount of money could ever provide, and He has provided it through His blood. Number one, Solomon said, I hated my life because of entertainment. Number two, he said it because of enrichment. But this last one may surprise you. Number three, I think he said it because of education. This is where students, especially young students, they're like, preach it, preacher. Education's a problem. This is where you bump your parents and say, listen, you better get this. He's talking about school. It's bad, so let's not do it anymore. Well, it's not quite that simple. But I do want to tell you where I get it. I want you to notice in verse number 12, he says, and I turned myself to behold wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do that cometh after the king, even that which hath already been done? Then I saw that wisdom excelleth folly, as far as light excelleth darkness. Now Solomon truly asked for wisdom, and God gave him wisdom. But I think that what Solomon was articulating at this point is he said, you know what, I've learned all kinds of things. And no doubt Solomon learned a lot of good things. And here's the problem. There's a lot of times we've learned a lot of things, but we don't pay attention to what we've learned, and we go right on making mistakes. Let me tell you, there are people in hell this very moment that have heard the gospel many times. Did they hear wisdom? Yes, but what did they do with it? Solomon, he was taught in all of the philosophies, I'm sure, of his day. Solomon was very well educated, and we live in a day and time where the world teaches you, listen, if you're going to have a successful life, you've got to have an education. Now, this is not an infomercial for ignorance, okay? I mean, I am the president of a Bible college. I'd like to think I do believe in education. But I'm going to tell you, you can take all the education that you get in every public university. You get all the education that the world has to offer, and I'm going to tell you, it may make you smart, but it won't make you righteous. It may make you smart in the eyes of the world, but what good is it to be smart in the eyes of the world and yet be totally spiritually blind? Parents, I want to encourage you to do something. And if this is the last time I'm here because of saying this, it's a sword I'll die on. But parents, let me tell you something. With your children, if you teach your children the value of a good education and yet you don't teach them the value of living for God and following Him, you have failed. If you have a child that makes a 6-digit salary and dies and goes to hell a millionaire, what have you done? And right now, we need to start thinking about that. It's not that I promote ignorance, but the answer is not in and of itself education. By the way, in our public universities, there are people that are being educated every day, and they're being taught things contrary to the Word of God and what your pastor would preach. Did you know there's a lot of pulpits in public universities? You know, and even private universities, you say, no, they are. They're called teacher lecterns, and they preach, and they preach, and they preach the world's philosophy over and over and over again. But I'm going to tell you, you can be educated, but at that point when you're educated and yet you have denied spiritual truth, really what have you learned? So I want to ask you this evening, how do you feel about your life? Are you satisfied in your life or no? Have you looked at your life and sometimes said, you know, I just sort of wake up and I go another day? Listen, somebody else knew how you felt. His name was Solomon, and Solomon had everything he could get. Solomon was entertained to the fullest, and Solomon had the most education, and yet he was hollow in his heart. And he said, therefore, I hated life. And my friend, if you're here tonight and you've never trusted Jesus Christ as your Savior, listen, you may come to a point in your life where you say, it's not even worth going another day. Did you know that there are people in the Bible who felt that way? Do you know in the book of Acts there was a man, you want to talk about everything going wrong at your job, he was a Philippian jailer. And you want to talk about a bad day is when all the prisoners are busted out. And the Bible tells us that here that Philippian jailer was brought to the point where he was about to take his own life. I'll tell you, if there was ever a man who said, therefore I hate my life, right there it was. But you know what happened? It was in the midst of that two preachers were on the scene. And you know what? Before it was over with, he heard the best news he could hear. You know what that word was? Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and thou shalt be saved. And that was given to a man who was about to take his own life. Can I tell you, the same news that rescued the Philippian jailer can rescue any person in this room? You remember what I said about vanity? Solomon said, behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. The word vanity is empty. How can you have an empty life? Well, you do these things, but you know, emptiness is just a bad place to be. When I was a kid, my parents used to take me to a local fair. And my favorite part about going to that fair was the cotton candy. You know, every kid has to about love cotton candy. It's just sugar. That's all it is. And I loved it. I still remember those. They looked like huge bags to me. Now they look like about this big. But I'm going to tell you, a huge bag. And I remember my dad, he'd buy me a bag of cotton candy on the way out. I remember one night I was sitting in the back seat. It was just me. I'm an only child. Mom and Dad are in the front. He's making the drive home. And I still remember taking that bag of cotton candy. And I didn't untie it. I just ripped it open. No use to untie it if you're going to eat it all. And man, I took handfuls of pink and blue. I mean, I just about pack it like a snowball and just shove it in my mouth. You know, for those of you who are like, boy, I have a hard time chewing. Well, the wonderful thing about cotton candy is if you can get it in, just let it sit, it'll disappear. And you know what? The whole way home, it's like I was having a snowball fight with myself. I was just shoving balls of that in my... and by the time I got home, I was sitting in the back seat of that car with two sticky hands, a ripped bag on the floorboard, and a stomach ache like you wouldn't believe. That cotton candy was vanity. But the sad reality is there's people that live that way. And they need the gospel. And if you're a Christian living that way, you need to get back to your roots. I pray that nobody will leave this room tonight with the heart of Solomon saying, therefore I hated my life. Let's bow our heads together in prayer. Our heads are bowed, our eyes are closed. I wonder if there are those here this evening and you'd say, Alton, I'm a Christian, but you know what? There's been a hollowness in my life. Listen, it's possible for that to happen to Christians. And I wonder if there's some here tonight, you'd say, Alton, I'm a Christian. I know that. I have no doubt that I am saved, but I will tell you, God has dealt with me about my entertainment and my enrichment. I've just gotten so out of balance. I've gotten so out of kilter. And the things that bring me happiness in this life, it's the things of this world. And God has shown me as a Christian that my balance is way off. And you'd say, Alton, tonight I'm a Christian, but I've just felt a little emptiness in my soul. And tonight I know why. Because I've been looking for the things of this world to satisfy me. And tonight I've been reminded that only Christ can satisfy me. And you'd say, Alton, would you pray for me as a Christian tonight? If that's you, would you slip your hand up? Or there's some like that tonight? God bless you. Thank you. You may put them down. Listen, is there somebody here this evening and you just go through every day and it just seems to get worse? You can't seem to be happy, you're never satisfied, and you've just about come to the point, while you've never said it, you felt like